Costa is brought to you by FQM Trident Limited, a subsidiary of First Quantum Minerals Limited.
As we entered the year 2024, Zambia found itself at the crossroad of hope and hardship. The year commenced with a glimmer of hope when the president unveiled a significant $3.5 billion restructuring deal with bond holders, swiftly followed by the announcement of International Resource Holding as an equity partner for Mopani copper mines, hinting at a potential path towards economic stability. However, this optimism was short-lived as a relentless drought swept across the nation, plunging it into adversity. By March, the president had no choice but to declare the drought a national disaster, which therefore the president did call for international assistance and for the international community to come in and help Zambia with an amount totaling to over $900 million. Adding to the mountain of economic strain, last week the Energy Regulation Board delivered another blow by announcing an increase in the fuel prices and endorsing the new electricity tariffs. In the face of these daunting challenges, attention now turns to the opposition political parties in Zambia. In this climate of adversity, what solutions do the opposition propose to Zambia through these troubled waters? Good evening. Welcome to Costa. My name is Andrew Mwansa, sitting in for Costa Mwansa. Tonight, we discuss the alternative solutions that the Patriots for Economic Progress have for the economic challenges that the country is passing through. Patriots for Economic Progress leader Tembo is my guest. Mr. Tembo, good evening. Thank you so much for joining us on Costa.
Good evening, Mr. Mwansa. How are you?
Very well. Hope you're well. I should make mention that Happy New Year. Haven't gotten to see you.
Yeah. Although we're in April, but Happy New Year. And of course, a very good evening to all the viewers out there.
The last time we featured you on Costa, we had a very heated conversation regarding the application of the rule of law in Zambia.
Indeed. You know, the national issues that we discuss, if it's not heated, then we are not doing justice to the debate. So for the debate to be fruitful, for it to bear fruit to the listeners and viewers out there, it has to be heated. And I hope today's will be heated as well.
For those joining the conversation on channel 271 on DSTV, thank you so much for joining us. But also those that are joining the conversation on channel 20 on GOTV, thank you so much. Obviously, some areas have been not shaded, and you're joining this conversation live on our social media platform, that is Diamond TV Zambia. But also, we are live on the Tembo page. Thank you so much for being part of this discussion this evening. Let's begin off with the fact that the president earlier on this year did announce that Zambia did manage to restructure over $3.5 billion of its debt. Now we stand at over 77% of the total external debt that we have to restructure. 23% is remaining. I'd like to find out from the position of the Patriots for Economic Progress what you make of how far we've gone in restructuring this debt.
Yeah, well, you know, the issue of debt restructuring in Zambia is a very difficult topic to debate, primarily because the government has been keeping secret the terms of the debt restructuring agreements. When you talk about debt restructuring, Mr. Mwansa, you need to understand exactly what you're talking about. First of all, when you enter into a debt agreement, that debt agreement will have the repayment period, maybe 3 years or 5 years. It will have the interest that you need to pay on the the debt sum. It might be 5%, it might be 6, 7%, or whatever the percentage. It will have the payment terms. How are you going to pay this debt? Are you going to be liquidating it over the period, the tenure of the debt, or are you going to be servicing the interest? In other words, paying off the interest, and then at the end of the tenure of the debt, you pay off the lump sum. What are the payment terms? So those are the three critical aspects of any debt. So when you talk about debt restructuring, you are essentially talking about varying one or more terms of the debt agreement. You might be varying the payment period. Instead of the initial agreed 5 years, you are now maybe asking for 6 years or 7 years. You might be varying the interest rate. Instead of the agreed 6%, maybe you're going to pay 5.5 or 5.7%. You might be varying the payment terms. Instead of you making monthly installments of, say, $30 million, you might have renegotiated and you're making monthly installments of $28 million. So debt restructuring is essentially varying or renegotiating your debt so that you vary one or more terms of the debt. Now, before we can sit and congratulate the government to say you've done a good job, you've restructured $3.5 billion of our debt, the question, the pertinent question that arises is what terms of those debts have been varied, and are they favorable to Zambia? You understand? So those are very important questions.
Which
yes.
we did ask just 2 days ago when we had the public forum, yes. And we asked that very important question to the Minister of Finance. And the Minister said that there's nothing that this government is hiding. It will make available that data that the opposition and stakeholders are asking for, but it has to also consult from those that they negotiated the date with. But on the side of government, they're quite transparent and they're free to publish the terms of this date. They're just waiting on the people that we're negotiating with to be able to agree that we can go ahead and publish.
Mr. Mansa, when you talk about the national debt, that's a public debt. So the information about the national debt is readily available. And we did see the Ministry of Finance publish all the external data. I think that was done sometime in 2022, if you remember. So the question then arises to say, if we are able to publish the debt agreements that the country has with various creditors, then why can't we publish the varied debt conditions in the name of debt restructuring? What is so secretive about it? There is nothing whatsoever about getting permission from the creditors because the actual debt agreement is in the public domain. So its variation should also be in the public domain. I tell you, I raise that point, Mr. Mansa, primarily because we might be celebrating prematurely. When you talk about the terms of a debt, you might vary some terms, but then you might add other terms which are inimical, which disadvantage Zambia, in which case we would be in a worse off position with a restructured debt than we were with an unrestructured debt. You understand? So before we can congratulate anybody for achieving a milestone in the, in terms of debt restructuring, it is important to know what that restructuring consists of. What terms of the debt agreements have been varied, and are they favorable to Zambia? We need to know that. Without knowing that, then it's very difficult to comment whether the debt restructuring achieved by government is progressive to the nation or it's not. Yes.
One of the concerns that stakeholders had at the public forum was if our assets have been, put, on the chopping board in terms of the negotiations, of our debt. The Minister of Finance was very clear that don't worry, no asset, has been put on the chopping board in terms of the debt and in terms of the fact that what if we, default on our debt? What happens to our strategic assets? The Minister was quite clear on that. But what is the main worry? I'd like to find that from the.
Let me just address that issue of the minister's statement. The minister's word, in my view, doesn't carry water. What carries water is the restructured debt agreements. Remember, it's not one debt; it's hundreds of debts.
That's true.
So we need to look at the terms of the restructured agreement, and we need to read for ourselves. I'm literate. I believe you are as well. We can read for ourselves. We don't need the minister reading for us and then informing us that no, those inimical terms are not there, or this or that, or our assets are safe. We don't need that. Let him make that public. We shall read for ourselves.
If you you were in office today,
Yes.
how would you have dealt with this issue of the long-standing of debt that Zambia is in?
First of all, my considered view, Mr. Mansa, is that as at 2021, I don't believe that we were, over-indebted. I don't think so. So my considered view is that we shouldn't have, as a nation, we shouldn't have put so much focus on debt restructuring at the expense of growing the economy. You understand? Remember that by 2021, our GDP was standing at about $30 billion, and our total external debt was standing at about $12 billion. So you are essentially talking about plus or minus 40, 43, 44% of GDP. It's not very bad. It's quite bad, but not very bad, in my view. If we had focused on growing the economy, and as we speak right now, if we had grown the economy from the 30 billion or so that it was in 2021 to maybe 40 or 42, 43, 45 billion, we would have been talking about our debt at less than 25%. And also, the other aspect is the focus by government should have been, like I said earlier, on one hand, growing the economy, but on the other hand, avoiding contracting additional debt. Because you can talk about debt restructuring, but for as long as you are continuously contracting additional debt, which this government has been doing, then you're not making progress. They got the external debt, it was actually not even 12 billion, it was 11 point something. As we speak right now, the external debt is nearing 15 billion. So within a period of 3 years, they've contracted almost $4 billion. That is external debt. When you talk about domestic debt, when they came into office,
these are cheap loans.
When they came into office on the 26th of August 2021, our domestic debt was standing at about 78 billion kwacha. When I say domestic debt, I'm talking about treasury bills and government bonds and so on and so forth. It was standing at about 78 billion kwacha. As we speak right now, it's standing at about 239 billion kwacha. So you're talking about a threefold increase in our domestic debt within a period of 3 years. When you talk about domestic arrears, when the UPND came in, when I talk about domestic arrears, I'm talking about the money that government owes to various suppliers of goods and services. People who supply goods and services to government. Our domestic arrears were standing at slightly over 25 billion kwacha. As we speak right now, our domestic arrears are standing at close to 60 billion kwacha, which is almost double. You understand? So the point is, President Hakainde has been so focused, and he keeps talking about how the previous administration overborrowed, which might be true to some extent, but the bottom line is that his government is borrowing far more, at a far more higher rate than the previous administration.
And the justification is that there's different.
There can be no justification for overborrowing.
These are concessional loans, these are cheaper loans. Most of them are
there can be no justification for overborrowing. The bottom line is that you only need to borrow to a level which you can sustain, to a level which you can service. So far, ever since the new Dawn came into office, they've never serviced a single loan. There's a moratorium on debt servicing. So evidently they cannot afford to service these loans, and yet they are borrowing additional loans. That is being reckless. That is being irresponsible. And also, when you look at
President Tembo, they're saying that, look, they're much more transparent in terms of their borrowing. They've come up with the Public Debt Management Act now.
Transparent, and yet they're refusing to publish the debt restructuring agreement. Where is the transparency?
Parliament sits before.
So the bottom line, Mr. Mansa, the bottom line is
that these loans that they're borrowing are very cheap. These are concessional loans. Some of them are with the interest as low as 0.5%.
So you need to understand, Mr. Mansa, my point, I have addressed that issue of cheap loans. You don't borrow because there's a cheap loan somewhere. You borrow because you need to put down money to good use. You borrow because you're going to afford to pay that debt. You don't borrow simply because there's a cheap loan somewhere. You understand? The other issue I wanted to raise is that insofar as the Patriotic Front government might have overborrowed during the 10 years they were in office, we were able to see what they did with that money. We were able to see the roads that they did. We saw an expanded Greatest Road. We saw an uplift of a facelift of Lusaka. We saw airports being constructed. We saw Lower Fuel Gorge being constructed. We saw infrastructure being done. There's nothing to point at for the billions of dollars that President Hakainde Hichilema has borrowed. Nothing, other than maybe for argument's sake, CDF. And CDF is just a reallocation of the budget from the central government, maybe under Minister of Education, Minister of Home Affairs. You reallocate that budget to the districts. And then instead of buying a Land Cruiser for the police under Ministry of Home Affairs and taking it to each and every police station, you buy a Land Cruiser under CDF, which has to cater for all the constituencies, all the police stations in a particular constituency. There is no change there. There is no improvement there in terms of utilization of funds. We can't point at anything that President Hakainde Hichilema has done with the billions of dollars, with the almost $4 billion he has borrowed in the past 3 years in terms of external debt. We can't point at anything that President Hakainde Hichilema has done with the more than 160 billion kwacha in domestic debt that he has borrowed in the past 3 years. We can't point at anything. We can't. Maybe except for that Petra thing that he commissioned in Kwacha constituency of Kitwe a few weeks ago. That's the only little development is brought to this.
It wasn't one. It wasn't one. It was 1,600.
But those Petra things, Mr. Mansa, again, you know, you are commissioning Petra things, but people can't afford to buy meal. So where are they going to get the food to eat so they can use the toilet? You need to address the issue of the food before you address the issue of the toilet. It's like putting the cat in front of the donkey. You need to, like putting the cat in front of the donkey. You need to put the cat behind the donkey so the donkey can pull the cat. You understand? You can't address the issue of people going to the toilet when you have the issue of people eating so they can go to the toilet.
Financing free education, don't see that as a good venture that government is spending money on?
You know, when you talk about free education, Mr. Manson, again, there are a lot of issues that arise there. You understand? To what extent is this education free? You understand? To what extent is it free? Okay. When you talk about kids who go to boarding school, they need to pay, and they are paying a far higher amount than they were paying previously. When you talk about tertiary university students, they need to pay. Even those who are on 100% government sponsorship, they still need to pay. What's the point of being on 100% government sponsorship if you are still required to pay? And also, when you look at the entire education model, let me digress a bit. Remember, some of us, when we were going to university, when I was going to Copperbelt University way back in the late 90s, we were being given a grant. In other words, it was a gift. So we were sponsored free of charge. But these kids now, they're being given a loan. And those loans, they have to deduct from their salaries when they start working. You understand? So if that is the situation, if these kids are being given a loan to finance their tertiary education or to finance whatever type of education, why are we restricting the number of beneficiaries? Because it's a loan, remember? It's a loan. So if it's a loan and we're going to recover, then why don't we give everybody? Because it's a loan, we're going to recover. It's different from the scenario where we're coming from, some of us where it was a gift, where you're saying, no, the wallet of the government is limited, so we can't give this free education to everybody. But that's a loan now. So my view is that, like, if I was president of Zambia, I would extend that student loan scheme to each and every student who wants to pursue tertiary education, because it's a loan. It's not a gift. It's something that government is going to recover. It's an investment. And they don't recover just the amount lent out. They recover that amount with interest. You understand? Yes.
$1.1 billion been invested in Mopani by International Resource Holdings. The people of the Copper Belt see this as a game changer. What does Pep'S see it as?
Well, the issue of Mopani, there's a lot of spinning of the facts there, too much spinning of the facts. That 1.1 billion is just on paper. In terms of, when you look at that agreement, lucky enough that agreement was able to leak out. And not that government released it, but it leaked out. When you look at the terms of that agreement, the actual amount which IRH is actually putting into Mopani is actually about $133 million, which is a very small amount. It's an amount that can be raised from the domestic market. There's no need of actually bringing in IRH and giving them about 51% stake in Mopani. If you monitor the news, Mr. Manson, you realize that the price of copper on the world market just surpassed the $10,000 mark a few days, if not a week ago, $10,000 per metric ton.
Yeah.
According to the cost of production study that was done some time back, For open pit mines, their average cost of production is about $2,500 per metric ton, and for underground mines, the cost of production was estimated at about $3,500. So, if those are the cost of productions, and the price of copper has surpassed $10,000 per metric ton, it gives you an idea of how much profit these mining companies are making out of mining our copper. And we had the opportunity when Glencore pulled out. Remember that when Glencore pulled out, they handed over that shareholding to government. That's why it was government's responsibility to look for another investor or to continue mining as government. Remember, the proposition by the previous regime was that they were going to continue mining Mopani and keep that shareholding. It's only when the UPND came into office that they decided that they would look for an external investor,
because
whom they gave that 52%, 51% in return for that 133 million. That 133 million is an amount that can be recovered within a month or two, based on current prices of copper on the world market, and also based on the estimated cost of production. And also, when you look at the trend, Mr. Mansa,
but
you realize,
but the fact that the fact that this CCMI was recording losses every month in millions of kwachas, don't you think then it proves that we didn't have capacity to run?
Let me finish my thought. So my point was that when you talk about the shareholding which was relinquished to that external shareholder, that was too much of a giveaway. And when you look at the trend, the overall trend of where copper prices are going, copper prices will continue rising for the simple reason that the world at large is moving away from these internal combustion vehicles to electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Yes. So those electric vehicles require a lot of copper in their production. So for as long as the world is making that transition from these internal combustion engines to electric vehicles, the demand for copper is going to be very high, not just this year, not just next year, but for the unforeseeable future, for the next 50, 60, 70 years. The price of copper is going to be very high. So right now, if you are a business person, having a copper mine as an asset is the best asset you can have. So at such a time, why would government be giving away a mine such as Mopani, 51% of a mine such as Mopani, at a giveaway price of about $133 million? From where we stand, Mr. Mansa, we suspect there's high-level corruption involved in that particular transaction. But I'll come to your question, which is, you are saying, why was ZCCM making losses? I don't know which ZCCM you're referring to, whether you're talking about the ZCCM Investment Holdings, which is a shareholder, a minority shareholder in a number of these mining companies, or you are talking about the ZCCM before we divested our portfolio, the ZCCM which used to own these mines before privatization. Which ZCCM are you referring to?
This is the CCMI that it took over Mopani from Glencore.
So ZCCM Investment Holdings is not making losses. ZCCM Investment Holdings is making a lot of profit. It's not making losses.
When we're running
if you talk
Mopani,
about the previous...
The time that we're running Mopani, after Glencore pulled out of Mopani, the time we began running Mopani as a country,
Mopani was pretty much, when Glencore pulled out, Mopani was on care and maintenance, so there wasn't any significant production taking place there.
And we're recording losses of millions of
when an asset is on care and maintenance, it means that you're not producing, but you need to keep pumping out the water, you need to do this and that so that it doesn't collapse.
As a result, we're recording losses.
Yeah, but we should have started production. You understand?
So you don't see international resource holdings coming, to resuscitate Mopani as a good.
They are not coming to resuscitate Mopani. If you say resuscitate, you are implying that Mopani was on the deathbed. You understand? So there's no resuscitation taking place. It's just resuming production. This is a mine which was put on care and maintenance, and now they are resuming production, not resuscitating Mopani. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to use.
Another would argue, President Tembo, that the fact that Glencore pulled out of this Mopani, it means that perhaps it was not a profitable, venture. profitable asset.
So when you look at metal prices, you realize that metal prices generally, especially in the past, they've always fluctuated up and down, up and down. If you remember, at the time that government decided to privatize the mines in 1996, thereabout, world metal prices were very low. You understand? Just like around 1988, 1987, when the economy went really down under Kaunda and people started demanding for multi-party democracy, copper prices had really gone down. You understand? Just like at the time that Anglo-America pulled out sometime in 2002, metal prices again had dipped really, really down. So prices on the world market for base metals especially, they keep fluctuating. They keep going up and down. But on average, they are reasonably high. And at the time that Glencore pulled out, copper prices were quite low. They were going at about $4,500 per ton. My view is that they made a bad decision. Just like Anglo-America, you remember Anglo-America? Just like Anglo-America made a mistake to pull out in 2002. You don't make long-term decisions based on short-term factors. That's a very poor decision-making technique. You need to base long-term decisions on long-term considerations. So us as a nation, when we look at Mopani, we shouldn't look at Mopani in terms of today or tomorrow. We should look at Mopani in terms of the benefits we can reap from it in the next 10, 20, 40, 60 years from now. When we begin to think like that, then we'll begin to try and develop this country.
The shareholding 51 against 49, you don't see that as a good deal?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. The bottom line is that we don't have a comparing.
The president says that this is the best we've negotiated for.
The challenge that is there in the mining sector in general, Mr. Mansa, is that there's a lot of theft taking place by these so-called international mining companies. I prefer to call it theft, both in terms of our tax revenues, as well as in terms of our jobs, in terms of business opportunities. So there's a lot of theft taking place by these international companies. And that theft is able to take place because we don't have a controlling stake in these mines. You understand? So the only way that we as a nation can benefit, whether in terms of ensuring that these mines pay their fair share of tax to the Zambia Revenue Authority, or ensuring that they employ the majority Zambians. We've got a lot of graduates who graduate from Copperbelt University, from UNZA, doing metallurgy, mining engineering. They end up going to sell hardware at town center there in Lusaka. Why? Because there are no job opportunities. Why are there no job opportunities? Because these mines who are controlled, it doesn't matter other shareholders, what matters is the people who control. Anyone having more than 50%. These mines which are controlled by foreign interests prefer to bring their own people to work in the mines in senior positions. Our people are only employed at very low level laborer technician position. You understand? At the end of the day, as a nation, we are not benefiting in terms of employment creation. When you talk about business opportunities, the majority of these mines, for instance, KCM, before they went out, now I understand they're back, they had relocated their procurement center from Chingora to Johannesburg. First Quantum had relocated their procurement center, I think up to now, from from their base in Zambia to Toronto in Canada. What that means is that when they want to procure any equipment, whether it is pumps or ABCD, instead of empowering local industries, they empower local industries from the countries where they come from. I don't know if you're old enough to remember when ZCCM used to run these mines, Ndora was very vibrant industrially. And the reason Ndora was very vibrant is because ZCCM used to buy from the local environment. So companies would come from South Africa, set up a factory in Ndora, so they can supply ZCCM in Rwanda, ZCCM in Ndora, Kitwe, Chingora, Chiriaumbe, and so on and so forth. That way, ZCCM was able to boost the local environment, the local economic environment.
Yes. Another very interesting, question that I want to ask you, over the same is the mining policy that we are following, under this new administration. Just early last week, the Minister of Finance says that the opposition keeps blaming the UPND for the current mining policy, but what simply the UPND did was to make, mining it to be attractive in Zambia to extent that, firms that don't particularly, into mining like IRH are looking for opportunities in Zambia. But also he justifies by stating that what we've simply done as a country is to align our policy according to the standard of the global standard. They say that if you check the mining policy of Congo, if you check the mining policy of Chile, and these big copper mining countries, the mining policy that Zambia has is the same with these mining countries.
Well, that argument, Mr. Massa, does not carry any water in my view, because when you look at Zambia, let's compare Zambia and DRC. For starters, DRC's tax rates are far higher than Zambia's, far higher. When you talk about the corporate tax rate, we are talking about 30%, they are talking about 42%, you understand? Any other mineral royalty, their mineral royalty rate is far higher than ours, you understand? In addition to that, there is instability in most of the eastern DRC where the mining takes place. Around the Goma area there is instability. There are people fighting, bombs dropping. Do we have instability in the Copper Belt or in Northwestern? There isn't. So we have a lower tax rate and we have no instability. Okay? So we're very attractive by any means. So why should the Minister of Finance go a step further and give tax holidays to the mines? Okay, because he gave $3.2 billion tax holiday to the mines over a period of 3 years in, that was 2021, at the moment he came into office, and that is in the 2022 national budget speech. Okay, so why do that? In my view, that is total theft, because there's no reason whatsoever why the UPND government should be giving away $3.2 billion of our taxpayers' money to the owners of the mines when they are already paying more tax compared to our biggest competitor, Congo DRC, when there is no instability in Zambia, and therefore this place is a more attractive destination. There is no reason whatsoever government should go a step further to try and attract investors in the mining sector. We are already very attractive. If not for that instability and low tax rates, the prices of copper on the world markets are very good. So even by the price itself alone, we are a very attractive destination because they will make supernormal profits. So in my view, those so-called tax incentives, that was theft of taxpayers' money. These people in UPND probably went out there and shared that money. They shared that $3.2 billion.
And the minister also says that these tax incentives are not only given to foreigners, they're tax incentives for everybody who wishes to do business with this beautiful country, Zambia. They don't segregate that Mr. Tembo wants to invest in a mining company, and so because he's Zambian, there's no tax holiday for him. These tax holidays are for everybody, every business. These people, I can assure you, Mr. Mansour, these people are not interested in empowering local mine owners. They are not at all. They are only interested in doing, especially when it comes to mining, they are only interested in doing business with foreign investors because they can agree on a bribe there and share the bribe in their offshore accounts there. Look at what happened to Mwembeshi Resources, which was being a project driven by the local investors, Zambians, trying to open a copper mine in Luangwa district. They came up with all sorts of arguments. At the end of the day, they gave a go-ahead to Mwembeshi, allowed them to mobilize. Mwembeshi brought their machinery, they started clearing, trying to set up structures, and then they told them to halt. 6 months later, they cancelled that mining license. You know what the implication of that is? Those investors were very messed up financially because you've pumped in resources. When you talk about a big project like mining, you don't invest your own money because you wouldn't have enough. You borrow.
So you borrow, and you've done your calculations to say within 3 to 4 years we'll start production or begin to pay you back, and then government tells you to stop. And then when you stop,
that becomes to be a debatable issue even during the Patriotic Front because of how strategic that particular place was. President Tembo.
I'll tell you something.
And we've seen a lot of people protest against the decision that government had given a go-ahead, for Mumbeshi.
In this day and age, Mr. Mansa, in this day and age, mining, agriculture, and tourism can go hand in hand together. When you talk about countries like the United States, the U.S. has a state which is called Alaska, which borders a bit of Russia on the North Pole there. I'm sure you're aware of it. There, they've got habitats for different types of animals, but there's also mining, and there's fishing, and there's agriculture taking place hand in hand. You know why? Because of the levels of technology where mining has reached now. So all you need to do is, the two, mining and tourism, they're not mutually exclusive anymore. It's not like if you go and do mining in Lower Zambia'S, then the animals will be killed. It's no longer like that. That is why developed countries are able to do that. They're able to do mining and have animal habitats, have ocean habitats, and have agriculture in the same location. They gave Mumbeshi Resources the terms of environmental impact assessments, something they needed to abide by. And there is no evidence that they abrogated that. They did not abrogate that. So why cancel their mining license? The only reason that President Hakainde Hichilema and his administration decided to cancel that mining license, in my view, is because they were jealous of the people who had invested in that project. They were afraid that those people might end up being richer than they are, than Hakainde and his friends are. That was their only worry. And on the basis of that jealousy, they cancelled that mining license. And they did not decline it. Remember, the Patriotic Front declined it. In fact, they didn't decline it. They didn't approve it.
They gave a go-ahead, but they didn't approve for them to proceed mining.
Yes. Yeah. But these ones, they had a more sinister plan. They felt that not giving them a go-ahead wasn't bad enough. So they gave them a go-ahead. After they pumped in money, they cancelled so that their money can be wasted and all the investors can be financially ruined. That is how evil your government is, Mr. Mansa.
Let's talk about what we've been hit by, the El Nino drought. The president did declare this drought as a national disaster. It's affected 84 out of the 116 districts. The president didn't just declare this as a national disaster. He did put in some mitigative measures, both the short-term and the long-term measures. From the perspective of the patriots for economic progress, do you think these mitigative measures are working so far? But also I would like to find out on the appeal the president has made for international support of monies amounting to over $900 million.
Yeah, to start with, Mr. Mansa, I don't agree with your statement where you say the president and his government have put in place mitigating measures to mitigate the effects of this drought. Because when you talk about the effects of the drought, we are talking primarily about the issue of hunger. Okay, that's the primary issue. Before we talk about anything else, we are talking about the issue of hunger among the people. Remember, more than 70% of our population, they depend on subsistence farming to feed themselves. So when you have a drought which has affected more than 80% of the country, the biggest issue is what are these people going to eat? Before we talk about anything else, what are these people going to eat? And up to now, today is the 5th of May. Up to now, there hasn't been a single bag of food, relief food, delivered to any part of the country. Not a single bag of relief food. The only so-called interventions that President Hakainde Hichilema has made in terms of this drought is, number one, he announced through Zambia National Service that Zambia National Service is going to grow some winter maize to try and assist with beefing up food security and so on and so on. If ZNS plants winter maize today, at what point is that winter maize going to be ready to give food to the people who are affected? It's going to take a very long time. The second intervention which President Hakainde Hichilema made with regard to the drought was to announce that the Food Reserve Agency should open up their sheds and do community sales of maize, meaning they open up their sheds and sell maize directly to the community instead of selling it to the millers. And that maize is being sold at 600 kwacha. Now, let me explain something to you, which President Hakainde Hichilema might not understand. I hope he's tuned in and is listening. When you talk about subsistence farmers, their source of income is primarily the crops they sell. Okay? When they sell those crops, they get a bit of money. That's the only time in a year, once in a year, when they tend to have some money. So when there is this drought going on, where there is major crop failure, it means that they don't have any crops to feed themselves, let alone sell. What that simply means is that they don't have any income. Zero. You understand? They are completely on zero. So what these people need across the country is not for FRA to open up their sheds and sell maize to the community at 600 kwacha, because people will be looking at the maize, they'll be passing, looking at the maize, meanwhile they are collapsing because of hunger. They can't afford to buy that 600 kwacha a bag maize. What is needed by government is to carry maize, carry food, whether mini meal or maize, in those ZNS trucks, not for sale, but for relief distribution. Go door to door and give people a bag of mini meal, a bag of maize, a bag of mini meal, a bag of maize, until people survive. Until this season is gone, the next rain season comes, the people plant and they harvest. They need to be taken care of by government. But Hakainde Hichilema and his administration are not doing that. They are making so-called interventions which have got no immediate impact on the hungry citizens. That, in my view, is total dereliction of duty on the part of the president.
Well, the fact that the president declared this, the drought as a national disaster, it means that it gives him power, to realign the budget. But also, we've seen that he has been asking for, humanitarian aid from the international community. The Minister of Finance the other week did announce that so far, stakeholders are willing to help Zambia mitigate the impact that this drought has brought to our country.
You raise a very good point, Mr. Mansa. You said that the declaration of the drought as a national disaster was supposed to give the president an opportunity to realign the national budget. That's a very important point. Even me, that is what I was looking up to. But it never happened. When you look at that speech which President Hichilema made to the nation, where he declared the drought a national disaster, he put up some figures in terms of what is needed to mitigate the disaster. So he came up with a figure of 23.5 billion kwacha. And he said that out of that 23.5 billion kwacha, which is needed to fight the drought, his government has organized 1.2 billion kwacha. And he has a deficit of 22.3 billion kwacha. That is what the president said. And he was appealing to the international community to actually solicit that money. Now, 22.3 billion kwacha is a lot of money. That's equivalent, like you rightly said, to more than $900 million. It's very unlikely that anyone will come on board and actually give you $900 million or even $100 million just as a handout. It's very unlikely. So at the end of the day, when you look at the donations that have been coming, the World Food Program donated some money towards the drought. They donated $4.3 million. So now look at the amount you are looking for, $900 million. Look at the donations which are coming from big UN agencies like World Food Program. That is 4.3 million. It just tells you the amounts which people are willing to donate to you, not that 900 million you are dreaming about. You understand? So our expectation was that with that declaration, the president will instruct the Minister of Finance, and the Minister of Finance will proceed to rearrange the budget or realign the budget and take the realigned budget to Parliament for approval so that they can get resources from other sectors and allocate them to relief food and cover that 22.2 billion deficit that is there. Because when you look at our national budget is about 200 billion kwacha. So out of 200 billion kwacha, we've got all these sectors where we put money. Surely, since we're talking about people dying of hunger, which is an emergency, out of that 200 billion kwacha, are we not able to get from this sector, that sector, that sector, and put together money for relief food? So that on TV, when we switch on our TVs, we'll see ZNS trucks going village to village, giving food to people, giving food, water bowsers, going to deliver water so that animals don't die of thirst. You know, that is the kind of interventions I would make if I was Republican president, not the rhetoric that President Hakainde Hichilema is giving to the people. And I will tell you the effects which are there already. People are very desperate, and you know, animal husbandry is not on a very large scale in this country. In most parts of this country, there are few people who keep a lot of animals. The majority of the people just keep 2 or 3 animals, you understand? But people are very desperate, and they're beginning to sell their last animals so they can buy food. When you go to Commercial Market, there's a portion after where they sell alcohol there's a portion where they sell goats. I buy goats regularly from that place. The average price of a goat there generally over the past year has been, you know, 700 kwacha, sometimes 600 kwacha. You go there today, you find that the price of goats has really dropped. You find goats going for 400 kwacha, 300 kwacha. You know why? There are too many farmers who are desperate to sell their animals, and they flooded the market. But the point is that even after they sell their animal at 300 kwacha, they would not have raised enough money to buy a bag of maize, because a bag of maize at ZRA sheds, FRA sheds is going for 600 kwacha. That is the level of desperation people are in. And their president is there talking about winter maize, talking about opening ZRA sheds, and people are clapping for him. That is not what is needed. What is needed is buy maize, buy mini meal, use the same ZNS trucks and deliver to the doorsteps, especially in the villages, so that abantu basamarire na njala. That is what a responsible president is supposed to do. And Hakainde Hichilema is very far, very, very far from a responsible president.
Just last week, the Energy Regulation Board did announce the upward adjustment in the pump price of fuel, but also we did see that the Energy Regulation Board also did endorse the new electricity tariffs that came in from ZESCO. Load shedding now is 8 hours. Projections by experts are that before the end of the year, we're going to have extended load shedding even up to 10 hours. What solutions are you proposing tonight, Mr. Tembo?
So, you know, when you talk about the economy, first of all, if you are going to improve the standard of living of the people, you need to grow the economy. Because when growing the economy is the ultimate solution in terms of the needs of the people. When you grow the economy, there will be more jobs available, which means when people apply, they can get a job. When people get a job, they'll have some income coming every month. When you grow the economy, apart from job creation, you also increase business opportunities, which means if someone starts a business, if Gyros decides to start a Vitumbua business tomorrow, when they tantika the Vitumbua by the roadside, those Vitumbua will move and should be able to sell and make a profit because the economy is growing. So there is no substitute for growing the economy. If you are the president, your ultimate objective should be to grow the economy at any and all means necessary. Grow the economy. Now, when you look at the things which are needed in order to grow an economy, you need the basic production inputs, which are electricity, fuel, and the likes. Okay, so if on one hand you escalate the price of fuel to where it is today, and on the other hand, you also escalate the price of electricity to where it is today, but not only that, you proceed to create scarcity, to create a shortage for electricity, where there is now rationing, where you've got major industries relocating from Zambia, going to Tanzania to set up in Tanzania because the cost of production is very high. here locally. It means that you as a government, you are not doing anything to create the necessary conducive environment to grow the economy. And like I told you earlier, Mr. Mansa, the ultimate objective of any serious president must be to grow the economy. So we have an administration in office who are doing a lot of things to undermine the economy. And that can only plunge the Zambian people deeper and deeper and deeper into misery and poverty. Okay, so you've got a president who, when he stands on a podium, he's talking about, no, we are growing the economy, we are doing this, we are doing that. But in reality, his actions undermine the economy. Because the moment you have load shedding, prolonged load shedding, which has got no end in sight, then already you've wiped out significant gains you would have made in the economy. That is why other countries who have serious presidents, like Namibia. You saw how Namibia went all over the region to try and secure power when they only had 2 hours of shedding. In that 2 hours of shedding, they came to Zambia, pleaded with government. I don't know how much they offered our government. Our government signed an agreement to export power to Namibia at all costs. Namibia wanted to have power at all times. The 2 hours load shedding they were having, to them, it wasn't good for their economy. They wanted to have power 100%. Here we are.
Can we blame anybody for the load shedding?
We are standing at 8 hours load shedding, going to 12 hours now. And nobody.
Tembo, that these are legacy issues. We've been over 80% dependent on hydroelectricity as a country. We depend on the rains. If we don't have the rains, then we won't have power. Clearly, President Tembo, we don't have the rains. Should we, put our heads in the sand and still blame this current administration for this load shedding?
Yes, because I'll tell you something. Our average consumption is about 3,100 megawatts at peak hour, or plus or minus. And even as we are undergoing this load shedding, we are still exporting power. You understand? You remember that agreement we signed with Namibia, it's still in force. We're still exporting power to Namibia, we're exporting power to Angola, we're exporting power to South Africa via Zimbabwe. So the question is, if the people we have in office who are running the affairs of this country really understand how the economy operates, really understand the importance of having stability of energy supply, to the growth of an economy, then they wouldn't be making the decisions they are making. You understand? That importation of power they are talking about is mere rhetoric. That is why they go around issuing press statements to say we are about to start importing power. They are not saying where we are importing it from. They are not saying how much we are importing. They are not saying how much load shedding will be reduced as a result of that importation. So it's mere propaganda, mere rhetoric. One of the ministers, I believe, had a slip of a tongue, and he said we're going to import power from Tanzania. Why? Because of that headline which had appeared in the international media, where they were saying, no, Tanzania has got excess power, so they're even shutting down some power generating facilities because they've got too much power in their grid. So one of the ministers was saying, no, we're going to import power from Tanzania. But that is propaganda, because there's no interconnector between Tanzania and Zambia. During Michael Chilufya-Sata's tenure in office, he wanted to build an interconnector between Tanzania and Zambia as one of his major projects, but he died before he could do that. There's no interconnector, so we can't import power from Tanzania, even if Tanzania right now has got excess power. So the question is, where is that power being imported from?
What is the solution to cheaper fuel?
It comes down to planning, Mr. Mansa. Fuel, you're talking about fuel, not energy. You've moved to fuel. Or you're talking about energy in general?
Let's get to fuel. What is the solution to cheaper fuel? Because the new administration had given us a formula of how they're going to reduce the price of fuel, gave us formulas. part of the things that the President spoke about was to cut down middlemen in the procurement of fuel. But it seems like that hasn't happened. But also the justification, President Tembo, has been that we're not paying. We're a lot of Nkongole to these oil marketing companies. Nkongole in excess of $800 million that this administration began to dismantle the time that they came into office.
That is mere rhetoric.
And the fact that we removed middlemen, the fact that we removed subsidies, that's the reason for why power is.
So the issue of middlemen is true, but what the President and his government did was to remove the middlemen who were put there by the previous regime, and they replaced them with their own middlemen. So that's what they did. But apart from the issue of middlemen, the ultimate solution to the issue of stable fuel prices is the issue of proper strategic planning. We as an economy, we need to be able to shield ourselves from external shocks happening on the international scene. You understand? So one of the ways to...
That's his exact language you had with President,
one of the ways to
address opposition.
One of the ways to address that, Mr. Mansa, is we need long-term adequate storage facilities for fuel, for oil, because it's difficult to store processed fuel in terms of petrol and diesel, but you can store long-term for decades, hundreds of years, the oil. So we need strategic oil storage facilities, that is number one, where we store millions of barrels of oil ourselves here in Zambia. We import it and we store it, okay? So that when there are fluctuations on the world market, instead of us buying expensive oil, remember those fluctuations are usually short-term. They're not long-term. It's either maybe Iran has attacked Israel and people are concerned of what impact that will have, so oil spikes on the world market, or there's war between Russia and Ukraine, and so on and so forth. There are those fluctuations taking place on the world market. So we need to be able to shield ourselves, whereby if there's a fluctuation on the world market and oil prices shoot up, instead of us buying expensive oil on the world market, we utilize some of our reserves. When oil prices drops, we buy cheap oil and restock our reserves. That is one of the strategic things we can do as a nation. When we do that, we would have shielded our economy from external world shocks. And that can only happen if we have proper transportation facilities in terms of the pipeline. That Tazama pipeline is good, but what we need to do is maybe build one or two more pipelines and then set up more processing facilities. It's a pity that President Hakainde Hichilema decided to destroy Indeni and convert it into a processed fuel facility. That is very, narrow thinking in my view. Anyone who believes that they need to get rid of their fuel processing facility and turn it into a storage facility has got a very narrow perception of how an economy operates. Because there was a shortage of oil. It mostly affected the copper belt about maybe 6 months ago. That shortage was attributed directly to the fuel processing facility in Dar es Salaam, where we get the fuel processed from. There was a strike at that processing facility. So we are exposed, instead of us shielding our economy from external shocks, we are, by getting rid of Indeni and importing processed fuel, which is processed by a refinery in Dar es Salaam, we are increasing the number of external shocks that our domestic economy is subjected to. If I was president of this country, I would have preserved Indeni. In addition to Indeni, I would have had a project to set up an oil refinery in each and every provincial center and an oil pipeline linking all the provincial centers. So that you can easily move oil. Yes, that's why it has to be long term. You need to think long term if you're going to develop a nation. So that we can move oil cheaply. This thing of moving oil, moving fuel with tankers is not sustainable. It's too expensive. Transportation alone adds more than 40% of the cost of the pump price of fuel. So when you look at the price of 35.5 kwacha per litre of petrol. Out of that 35.5 kwacha, more than 16 kwacha is attributed to transportation only. And the reason that huge amount is attributed to transportation is because of the mode of transportation we use. Fuel tankers, road transport, that's a very expensive mode of transportation. If you are going to have reasonable pump prices of oil, you need to have transportation through pipelines. So in addition to that Tazama pipeline, build 2 or 3 more pipelines. Instead of closing down in Deni, put up 4 or 5 more oil refineries across the country. When you do that, you're going to have a reasonably priced fuel which is going to be affordable to the consumers and which is going to be able to drive your economic growth.
There's 2 things that I want to conclude with as we conclude with the program, President Tembo. Let's talk about an issue around Zambia's democracy. There's been concern from civil society organizations and the church that Zambia's democracy is shrinking. What is the perspective of the patriots for economic progress?
Yeah, that is a very correct observation. We have a situation, Mr. Mansa, whereby you have a president in office, a president who has failed to run the affairs of this country, a president who has failed to govern, a president who has failed to turn around the economic fortunes of the people. And he is very cognizant of the fact that he has lost popularity. He has significantly lost popularity among the masses. And he is aware about the type of people that Zambians are. The Zambian people might appear to be docile, they might not talk, you might appear to dominate them because you send people to talk for you as a government on social media and so on and so forth. But the Zambian people know what they want. And when the time comes, they will make the right decisions in 2026. So Hakainde Hichilema is fully aware of that. And out of desperation, knowing that he's on his way out, if he was to maintain a fair playing field. Out of desperation, he's trying to tilt the playing field in his favor, so that despite his failures in terms of delivering his promises to the people, despite him losing favor from the people, he can still hang on to power in 2026. So how does he try to tilt the playing field in his favor? Number one, ever since President Hakainde Hichilema became president of Zambia, him and his Inspector General of Police have never allowed a single opposition rally in 3 years. All the requests, including our own requests, have been declined, have been turned down. On the other hand, he's the only one campaigning, opening toilets in Kwacha there for people who are hungry, who will not even use those toilets.
The UPND chairman, Gilbert,
so on and so
complaining that they've been applying for
the bottom line,
rallies, but they've been refused as well, and so it's across the board.
Stop mocking the Zambian people, Mr. Mansa, with your Iswanism. So the bottom line is that apart from the issue of rallies, you've got these arrests. Anyone who speaks negatively against the government, anyone who points out the ills of the UPND administration is very quickly arrested and taken to court, where a UPND-aligned magistrate is going to be waiting to ensure that he or she convicts regardless of the evidence. So they've got a cartel. It's a mafia government. It's a cartel. Hakainde Hichilema gives the instruction, go and arrest that one. The police come, they arrest that person, a select group of police. Okay? A select group of police who I prefer to refer to as the Zambia'S squad, who are based at force headquarters there. All the political cases involving political opponents are done by a group of about 20 officers, regardless of where it is, where the accused person stays. If it was a fair application of the law, if I'm in Guerrero and I'm alleged to have committed hate speech or use of insulting language to the president or whatever the case, why is it not that CID officers from Guerrero police station approach me, summon me, and arrest me there? Similarly, if someone says in Matero, why don't officers from Matero go and arrest that person, or officers from any other place? Why is it that we only have a group of 20 officers or so based at force headquarters who always handle political cases? It tells you that these officers do not operate based on enforcing the law now. They operate on instructions. They operate on Hakainde Chirema, picking up the phone and calling either UE or any of those chaps there at force headquarters and say, go and arrest Tembo. And then they'll arrest you. When they arrest you, they take you to court, and it's a cartel. It's basically
how do you feel your case has been handled? Your case that you have against UPND Secretary General Honorable Batuke Menda over hate speech.
Yeah, so on that case, we saw Batuke Menda. The evidence is there, the witnesses are there. He was captured on video, referring to the Archbishop of Lusaka, His Grace Dr. Alec Banda, as the Lucifer of Zambia. You know, Lucifer is Satan, so if I refer to you as Satan, surely that is hate speech. You understand? That is hate speech. So we filed the complaint, and that complaint went to court. And Gilbert Piri, the Director of Public Prosecutions, he refused to give consent. As we are speaking right now, we've been trying to get the ruling that was made by the magistrate on that matter. It's not on file. We made a search more than a month ago. That ruling is not on file. We are also trying to get a copy of the letter which the DPP allegedly wrote to the magistrate, informing the magistrate who was handling the matter that they've refused to give consent. It's not on file. Yes, and we are trying to get those documents because we want to file judicial review proceedings at the High Court. So it's a mafia arrangement. You've got a matter which is dismissed, but the file is incomplete. There are certain documents which they've put out and hidden somewhere, which they know you're going to need to take the matter to the High Court. So it's a mafia system. And that's why, in my considered view, at this point in time, in my considered view, any person who still genuinely supports President Hakainde Hichilema and his UPND administration, any person who genuinely, I'm not talking about people who support because their parents are employed, or who support because they are being given contracts, or who support because they are given money. Any person who genuinely, just out of the volition of their heart, any person who genuinely supports President Hakainde Hichilema at this point in time, any person who genuinely supports President Hakainde Hichilema and his UPND government, in my considered view, that person is not normal. They need to be taken to Chainama and they need to be examined.
Let's talk about the recent meeting you had with President Edgar Lungu over the OCA project. It seems you want to join OCA. Is that so?
Mr. Mansa, I'm sure you remember, not so long ago, I think about 6 weeks ago, I wrote a very detailed article about OCA. And in that article, I outlined what I believe are some of the key weaknesses which OCA has based on the current political environment. And after I wrote that article, you know, as we were chatting with one of my colleagues, one of my friends challenged me. And they said, but President Tembo, I've read your article, and you've very accurately outlined what you believe are some of the key weaknesses that OCA has. But you did not show or give out any solutions to those perceived weaknesses. Is it that you are happy that OCA has these weaknesses, or what?
Yeah.
So that question really touched me. I began to reflect, and I asked myself, okay, we have this opposition unity project, which might have its own inherent weaknesses, but do I sit here and keep laughing at those weaknesses, or do I try to come closer, come near, and help address those weaknesses? You understand? So, you know, my conscience told me to choose the latter. As we speak right now, I'm consulting because I've got people I work with in the party. I'm consulting how best we can work together with the UCA, not only myself, but I'm also engaging my other fellow opposition leaders on how best we can embrace this UCA project, so that as we go up to the 2026 elections, we are all going to be united. Myself, UCA, Kasonde Mwenda, Fred Membe, we are all going to be united as we approach 2026, so that we can deliver a better Zambia for the Zambian people. The Zambian people have been heartbroken enough. They had placed a lot of faith in President Hakainde Hichilema. They thought he's going to turn around the economy. They thought he's going to improve their well-being. But it's evident the man has failed. The man has failed. It's even regrettable that he's able to argue that he has succeeded. You begin to wonder, is our president delusional or what? Because what has he succeeded on? When you look at prices of pretty much everything, you talk about mini meal, it has more than doubled. You talk about the exchange rate, it has more than doubled. You talk about fuel prices, they've more than doubled. So when you say you've succeeded as a president, what exactly are you talking about? Are you talking about succeeding to fill your pockets in your offshore bank accounts from the money you give tax holidays to the mines, or you're talking about succeeding in terms of uplifting the welfare of the people? If it's the welfare of the people, then you can't argue you've succeeded, because the evidence is right in your face. You've failed. So in terms of the UCA project, as we speak right now, we have a very big appetite, and we engaged with the UCA leaders, we engaged with President Lungu, we engaged with the UCA chairman. We are nearing what I believe will be a mutually beneficial arrangement where we can unite and we can take this country forward.
Patriots for Economic Progress President, Mr. Sean Tembo, thank you so much for having made time to speak to the Zambians tonight on Costa.
Thank you for having me, and a very good evening to the Zambian people.
We've been discussing Patriots for Economic Progress's alternative solutions to Zambia's economic challenges. Patriots for Economic Progress leader Sean Tembo was joining me. Thank you so much for joining us on Costa tonight. Join Costa once next week at exactly 21:15 right here on Diamond TV.
Costa was brought to you by FQM Trident Limited, a subsidiary of First Quantum Minerals.